Hello and welcome everybody to Getting APIs to Work. Today we'll talk about cargo cults and we'll ask where that name comes from, where they happen, and we also talk about a few examples. As so often with me is Mike Amundsen. Hey Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you again.
Thanks for being here. And I'm really interested to hear some of your experience about cargo cults because as we'll see, I think we both come in touch with these in one form or another more often than you might think.
More often than I think anyone thinks or even notices. So that leads right to the very first question. Where does this idea of cargo cult come from, and why is it an interesting topic? You've talked about this before.
Yeah, it's an interesting name, and I think you read about it fairly often, or at least every now and then. So the idea comes back from, I think, mid last century, where there were islands in the South Pacific where American planes arrived to establish military bases, and they brought with them cargo, good stuff, food, medicine, all these good things, and the people living there liked it. It was good stuff that they hadn't seen before. And then at some point, when the war was over, the Americans disappeared and abandoned the bases that they had. And then there were some cults springing up that mirrored the behavior that they had seen. So they were like marching up and down the runway with like wooden guns, or they would build even control towers out of wood, or they would even build complete planes out of grass and all kinds of materials, because for them it was like, well, if when those things were there, we got the cargo. So the hope was that if you get these behaviors right, then the cargo will arrive. And this, I think this is just the genesis of the name. And of course today we're not really talking about the exact same thing, but I think it's a really interesting thought how this emerged.
So that sort of leads to the next question, which is I hear of this a lot in the tech space. Avoid cargo cults. Why is the tech space a place where this would come up?
That's an interesting question, and I've asked myself that a fair bit, and it's probably somewhere else as well. It's just because we are in the tech space, so that's where we hear a lot of things. But in my mind, in part at least, it's because the tech space is relatively complex. So it's sometimes hard to understand cause and effect, and what was really causing this to happen. Is this something that just happened as a byproduct of something else, or is this really what caused all the other stuff to happen? And I think in the tech space also, because for a lot of people tech is like almost magical, right? There is this kind of temptation to give into this pattern and say, well, every time when this happened, then, or when I observed this thing happened and I want this to happen, so I'll just follow this pattern. So I think tech, because of the complexity, I think, and because it is a little bit opaque for many, I think it has a certain risk for this pattern to emerge in today's world.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and I think the complexity is one of the keys to all of this. So many things going on. If you just think about the reason this is working well is because I read one of Mike's books and we did a whole bunch of APIs. That may not actually be the reason this is working well, right?
Maybe it is.
Maybe.
But you're right. I mean, it's probably not always that obvious, that people just basically buy computers and put them in their office and say, well, Google has a lot of computers, so it's gonna work for me now. So that probably is not quite as blatantly kind of a misguided idea. But give me one example from your experience where you would say that this is something that you've observed, where you say, well, it's kind of understandable why maybe there was this expectation, but it turned out that it was not a very good expectation to have, and it turned out to be counterproductive.
Yep. One of the examples, one of the venues for me of this kind of cargoism is this notion of KPIs. Like we are going to measure something. We're going to measure some key.
I hear a reflection of Goodhart.
Oh, this is exactly right.
Goodhart's law. But let's jump over that. But we had that. I'll link that.
Good. That's good because we've done a Goodhart's law piece, right? So I've got this key performance indicator, and I decide that what our goal is to have I'm going to use lots of APIs. We're going to build lots of APIs. We're going to transform into an API company, because I have this association that where there are lots of APIs at Google, there's lots of APIs at Netflix, and so on and so forth. So you begin with this notion that I need lots of APIs, but you never kind of go beyond that. Are the APIs actually doing what they need to do? Am I building the right APIs? I think one of the other things you talk about a lot is what is a good API? You used to be associated with a company called Good API, right? So I
Best
think
company
that's an
name
example.
Ever.
It is a great name.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. But that's the
But
first
yeah,
example I came to.
yeah, and I think that's almost enough. I think, like as an example, right? It's like this idea of, well, APIs aren't magical. So in some companies they do good things, in other companies they are probably still there, but they're not really any game changer for how the company works. So there must be a difference, right? In what
Yep.
those APIs are, how they're utilized, how they're managed, how they're designed, right? All these kind of factors. So by just using what you said, right? This blind KPI says APIs, get to work, everybody, right? Then that like has so many strange things in there where it would be surprising if that actually led to good results. So what have you seen when kind of like this was the marching order?
Yeah, so I'll give an example of a very large consumer bank that went on this KPI idea, this count of APIs, and it turns out they built lots and lots of APIs, actually more than 1,000 of them in a short amount of time. One of the questions asked was, well, which APIs are actually being used and contributing in some positive way? And the very first answer I got back was really telling to me. And that answer was, we don't know. So what happened is we had kind of set our whole future on the notion of having a lot of them, but we didn't really know if they were actually contributing in a positive way, sort of the things you were talking about before. So it took a little bit more time. We kind of wised up, and then we started doing some inspection, and we actually started to get closer to getting some good API feedback. But in the beginning, nobody was sure what was going on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is a story that you could probably translate to many scenarios, right? It's like you do this cargo cult thing, and then you're kind of getting disappointed by the cargo not arriving, and then you start digging a little deeper. It's like, what's going on here? And then hopefully at some point you'll figure it out, and you understand that there's more to it than just, for example, counting APIs.
Yep.
I think that's already enough for us today. We just wanted to talk about cargo cults, and I think the example you gave is one that I think, for the next couple of years, we probably will keep seeing in some more companies.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think just for people managing in that space, it's important to be aware of it, to always think about, why am I doing this? Am I sure that I'm doing the right thing for the right things to happen? And then maybe that keeps you from falling into that trap, at least a little bit. Okay, Mike, thank you so much for joining. I think this was another good episode in our kind of little series of laws and other things that you maybe should keep in mind when you go about your API business. And I hope everybody found this interesting. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing. And with that, we're done for today. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mike.
So long.
Until next time. Keep getting APIs to work. Bye.
Bye.